I want to share something with you today about how I perceive and interpret touch, and I've asked a friend of mine to help me demonstrate this using a pencil and a chopstick. I am grateful for the ongoing support of occupational therapists who continue to support my sensory self-identification of considerable sensory self-regulation challenges. This ongoing support has helped me self-identify that my challenges are greater than simply not trusting my sense of touch. I am grateful for the support to accept the language others use to describe the challenges I experience, trusting my sense of touch. I'm over-responsive to touch stimulation. Light touch can be adverse at times. I find it difficult to understand touch in terms of pressure, location, and movement on my body, particularly on my face and in my mouth. I am grateful for the ongoing support of occupational therapists who are supporting me to learn that my lack of ability to localize where I perceive touch on my body is the easiest challenge for me to come to terms with, to describe with the help of those who are supporting the occupational therapists that continue to support my sensory needs of self-identification. Gratitude replaced the persistent feelings of frustration and isolation when I was supported to learn a new language to describe my sensory regulation issues and their impacts on my quality of life. While I value Collage as my primary way of processing information, of learning new concepts, languages, and ways of interacting with my community, I gained a new and deeper appreciation for additional sensory self-regulation roles for my collage practice. This thimble represents the best way of me describing my visual sensory processing capacity. The small size of the thimble means that I quickly become overwhelmed using my visual sense. My supporters are encouraging me to accept I am overusing my visual sense. My visual abilities have become my primary means of compensating for my poor comprehension of my senses of touch and proprioception. My supporters are helping me realize that my sensory world becomes very overwhelmed when I rely on my sense of hearing. I am grateful they are helping me to recognize when I am in environments where I have to process touch, proprioceptive, and interoceptive information, while slightly larger than my visual capacity for the day, I quickly exhaust the volume of this shot glass as I attempt to function daily. Supported sensory self-identification is telling me that, like this hydrovac, my proprioceptive, interoceptive, and aspects of my vestibular senses are all under-responsive, potentially in ways I only pick up on when one of my auditory and or visual processing capacities become overwhelmed. In healthcare environments, picture the slurry capacity of this truck as being how the system currently attempts to manage my sensory dysregulation. Legally, due to weight, this truck can't carry around a full load of slurry. Law declares it full when its slurry tank is half full. I like to think of this as my sense of touch struggling to cope with insufficient information. Think of the volume of air moved by this truck to fill its slurry tank as my struggles with vestibular, proprioceptive, and interoceptive sensory inputs. In healthcare environments, even at the best of times, my supporters are now helping me to self-identify. I, at best, half fill my capacity for these inputs before I am even able to function in a day, even before I attempt to function in a healthcare environment. Collage is helping me to realize This sensory dysregulation contributes to my burnout. When my environment cannot support my sensory needs, I shut down. I endure trauma. From events, the concepts of informed consent tells me I am not supposed to endure in the healthcare system. I am grateful for my supporters continuing to facilitate dialogic language learning, to encourage me to dream of a time when borrowed best practices from the fields of semiconductor and European best practices for pharmaceutical manufacturing grade A environments, surgical and medical device reprocessing sciences, all provide mutually safe ways of initiating and maintaining respectful, patient-led, patient-centered, reciprocally validating care interactions. The dreams my supporters keep encouraging me to have use these best practices to hold mutually safe and mutually caring space for each other. Space where we can lead each other through ways of supporting my sensory co-regulation throughout the rest of my appointment. As sensory environmental consent is established, mutually validated, and stewarded by our environment during my appointment, my anxieties are outsourced collaboratively through mutually participatory, tactile verbal communication. This dialogue of best practices stewards my consent throughout my appointment. In the presence of fluid, the best practice of double gloving with two highly contrasting colored gloves will reveal a hole in the outer glove by way of an easily observable different colored patch developing when fluid gets into the hole, allowing me to observe for such a hole when my senses become overwhelmed, calms me. I am reassured when I don't observe a hole in the outer glove, even when my tactile perceptive processing tells me there is a hole or tear in the outer glove. Ideally, double gloving will use two sterile surgical gloves, the combination of which produces a stiff, very smooth combination with a minimum finger wall thickness of 16 mils, with a maximum thickness being 26 mils. Currently, I realize to find such a glove combination, I need to work with one sterile surgical glove and one non-sterile disposable glove. While I value the best practice of assisted donning of surgical gloves, as such a best practice provides vital proprioceptive interaction to help with my sensory self-regulation, I dream of adding a step of using a disinfecting wipe to wipe the outside of our non-sterile gloves down after donning, respecting the best practice of covering the gown cuff by 1 inch. Before we use the assisted donning approach to don our sterile surgical overgloves. I dream of a time when a third party stewards the best practice of having the underglove extend 1 inch above the sock-knit cuff of the gown. This best practice states that the sock-knit gown cuffs must remain completely covered during the entire procedure. Any emergence of the gown cuff must be corrected immediately. My sensory systems tell me if there is cuff roll down to a point where there is exposed skin at the wrist, that my sensory environment has withdrawn its consent for my care until this issue is corrected. I dream that the combination of these best practices, when stewarded with the same surgical conscience, as well as mutual respect for sterile technique and surgical asepsis, demanded of the environment for someone undergoing major surgery, support my executive function, sensory co-regulation, as well as allow me to become more grounded through the tactile aspect of tactile verbal communications. I dream when these best practices are applied to my oral health care with the same respect a genuinely sterile environment demands. When mutually respected, that I will be able to voluntarily close my eyes, thus saving visual processing capacity, while becoming more dependent on needed tactile communications. To support environmental accountability, thus mutually validating sensory environmental informed consent for my oral health care, please walk me through counting all consumables and instrumentation. This will help reduce the anxiety I experience around environmental contamination when I can interrogate package integrity and the original condition of the internal Class 5 integrating indicators, collaboratively marking out locations for items in ways that improves the sterility of the sterile field and supports environmental consent for my care, ways that allow us to succinctly review our count at the end of our appointment, so that our environment can mutually demonstrate to both my carer and me that everything is accounted for as it was when we unwrapped it. I dream that these best practices become the foundation for other best practices which support the flow of tactile verbal communications throughout my appointment, which sequentially steward sensory environmental informed consent for my care in mutually validating ways, thus granting me both agency and capacity that our care system currently minimizes for invisibly disabled persons. Using strategies to provide myself with proprioceptive, interoceptive, and vestibular inputs daily, I dream I am able to improve the degree I am able to use tactile verbal communications to support my remaining grounded during my oral health care, that all the best practices I dream of borrowing consistently grant me genuine, multimodal communications, so I no longer need to fear becoming disoriented by sensory inputs I struggle to process. Equity grants me relational capacity to grant authentic, mutual, sensory environmental informed consent for my care.